She didn't leave a note, just froze the cards her son and daughter-in-law lived on. By sunset, their grocery order failed. By midnight, her story had 2 million reads. "My mother-in-law is ruining our lives," Lindsay wept online. But Marianne wasn't hiding. She was documenting, and now they want her declared unstable, to get back what she took with her silence. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The hallway was dark, but the kitchen light bled out in thin streaks beneath the door. Marianne stood barefoot on the hardwood, still damp from mopping, the scent of lemon and pine sol clinging to the air. Her left hand trembled slightly around the laundry basket. Not from age, just exhaustion. Then she heard it. "She's just mouths to feed now. It's exhausting." Lindsay's voice was low but sharp, slicing straight through the door. Marianne didn't move. She didn't breathe. Her spine straightened on instinct. "She doesn't even help with the girls anymore," Lindsay added. "She just exists. I can't take care of another person. She's not dying. She's just extra." "And Brian?" Silence. Then, "Yeah, I know." Marianne blinked once, slowly, like her body was buffering. A pause before collapse. She stepped backward, the floor cool beneath her arches, and carried the laundry basket upstairs as if nothing had happened. She folded each towel like muscle memory, every edge crisp and centered. Her hands remembered order, even when her heart broke quietly in the next room. Dinner was meatloaf, salad, rolls she baked herself. No one thanked her. Her granddaughters laughed with their mouths full. Lindsay scrolled on her phone between bites. Brian complimented the store-bought wine and said nothing else. Marianne passed the potatoes and looked around the table, the wallpaper she chose, the dishes she paid for, the lights above that she replaced last month when Brian said he was swamped. No one looked back at her. She reached for her water glass and realized she wasn't invisible. She was background. Wallpaper, too. Later that night, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator, Marianne sat at her small desk in the guest room that was once called Nana's space. Now it held her bed, her coats, and not much else. She opened the bottom drawer and slid aside the folders until her fingers touched a faded leather envelope. Inside, her old Solo credit union account login, the one she hadn't touched since 2014. She booted up her laptop, heart ticking with each loading bar, and typed in her credentials. The screen loaded. The account was still active. Her balance, $4,218.56. Not much, but hers. She opened a blank document and typed the words at the top in bold, "What I paid for. What I own." She scrolled back through bank statements, print receipts from CVS and Walgreens, pharmacy co-pays, gas fill-ups, babysitting school pickups, groceries, 6 years of being quiet and useful. She began the list. Mortgage supplement, $600 per month for 48 months. Groceries, $200 per week, average, times 72 months. Childcare, unpaid. She paused, then typed, "Emotional labor. Incalculable." The printer buzzed to life. Sheets curled into the tray one by one, hot to the touch. Marianne stacked them in a folder labeled Personal Ledger. Then she clicked over to her credit union app. She looked at the household credit card, the one she co-signed to help their score. She didn't owe them this anymore. She clicked Freeze card. Then she did something that surprised even herself. She stood, walked to the closet, and reached for the large red duffel she hadn't touched since Brian's wedding weekend. The zipper dragged open like the beginning of a song. She folded 3 outfits, a toiletry bag, and tucked in her passport and birth certificate. At the last second, she added the photo of her late husband, still in its cheap Walmart frame. The house was still silent. She walked over to the guest room door and locked it, then turned back, opened her laptop again, and searched. Short-term rentals near me. Weekly. Cash accepted. Downstairs, Lindsay's voice floated up faintly again. This time, laughter. Something on the TV. Marianne zipped her duffel shut, breathing through her nose. Calm. Decisive. No one would hear her leave. Not yet. But they would feel it. The house was still as a photograph. No footsteps. No alarms. No half-asleep toddlers reaching for juice boxes, just the click of the front door unlocking at 4:28 a.m. Marianne didn't close it hard. She eased it shut behind her, barely letting the latch kiss the frame. The early morning chill wrapped around her like a dare, wet with dew, hushed like a held breath. The red duffel sat squarely in the passenger seat. Her lockbox was buckled in beside it. Her hand paused over the ignition. One last glance at the porch light. Office. She turned the key. She drove 90 miles without music, windows cracked just enough to hear the wind insist she was still moving. Her coffee thermos trembled in the cup holder each time she hit a bump, but she didn't sip. Her eyes stayed fixed ahead, blinking only when necessary. At a gas station off Route 6, she pulled into a shadowed corner and dug through her purse for cash. Real bills, not cards. Inside, she bought a burner phone, a map, a tube of toothpaste, and a bag of salted cashews. No one looked at her twice. That felt new. By 7:05 a.m., she was checking into a place called Briar Hollow Cottage, a clapboard unit that smelled of cedar and old pine cleaner. She handed over $500 in cash. No receipt, no paper trail, and signed in under her middle name, Grace. The woman behind the desk raised an eyebrow. First time hiding from something? Marianne smiled. Number first time, not apologizing for it. At 8:12 a.m., Marianne sat alone in the kitchenette with a cracked leather-bound notebook and a pen she found at the bottom of her purse. On the first page, she wrote, "I've always paid. I've just never billed them." She paused, then added, "This is the invoice. Payback comes in absence." Before breakfast ended, she pulled out her phone, turned off Wi-Fi, opened her credit card app, and began freezing them all. One by one. Gas card, freeze. Grocery card, freeze. Utility autopay, disable. Streaming, log out. Joint debit, revoke. With each freeze, it felt like she was reclaiming inches of herself. Not revenge, just restoration. Then she opened her contacts and pressed airplane mode, a lock without a key. Marianne made eggs and toast from the welcome basket in the cottage fridge. Everything tasted strange without background noise. No kids yelling, no Lindsay microwaving soup and sighing loudly when asked to share. Just the soft clink of her fork, the ticking of an unfamiliar clock, and the smell of pine outside her window. She washed her dish, dried it by hand, and tucked her notebook beside her journal in the drawer. No one to clean up after, no one to interrupt her thoughts, and for once, no one to disappoint. Around 10:43 a.m., the phone buzzed in a ripple of static. It startled her. She hadn't realized the burner could still ping through emergency Wi-Fi. The screen read, "Brian." She stared at it, let it ring. The next text popped up like a pushy whisper. "Where are you? Lindsay can't get groceries. The card won't go through." She let the phone face down on the counter and poured herself another cup of coffee. No reply, no apology, just panic disguised as inconvenience. She stirred in cream and took the first full sip of her day. Marianne didn't throw her phone across the room. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply let it ring until it stopped. Then, calmly, she put it inside a drawer lined with lavender paper, closed it, and locked it with the tiny brass key from her childhood jewelry box. She would answer them, just not with words. At 8:30 the next morning, she walked into the quiet little post office in town. It smelled of dust, copier ink, and a faint lemon cleaner. The man behind the counter looked half asleep. "I need a P.O. box," she said, placing her ID and cash on the counter. He blinked at her, then nodded. "For how long?" "Indefinitely," she replied. Box 112 was hers in minutes. A tiny brass key, a new beginning. It felt like something out of a spy novel. Back at the cottage, Marianne logged into her credit monitoring account with the same sinking curiosity one might feel before opening a sealed envelope from the IRS. She scrolled and stopped. There were 5 open accounts she didn't recognize. One was an AT&T iPhone plan under her full name, but the billing address wasn't hers. The others, store cards, Target, Home Depot. One, disturbingly, was maxed out. She scrolled again. Lindsay's name appeared in one shared application from 2 years ago, buried under the line, "Authorized Household Member." Marianne leaned back, breath caught at the top of her throat. She stood, walked to the kitchenette, and poured herself a tall glass of water, hands trembling, the glass knocking softly against the rim of the sink. Then she picked up her lockbox, pulled out the manila folder marked Legal, Personal, and found the number for Rourke. He answered after 2 rings. "Marianne," he said, voice low and unfazed, "I've been expecting you." She told him everything, quietly, clearly. No dramatic flourish, just the facts. When she was done, he exhaled through his nose like a man who'd just loaded the first bullet into the chamber. "We'll start with identity protection and asset auditing. I'll escalate the unauthorized credit use and file a claim with each issuer, but first, we send a cease and desist." Marianne didn't flinch. "Good. Send it to this new address." She read him the P.O. box number slowly, clearly, then added, "And Rourke, I want it sent by signature confirmation." He chuckled once. "Already done." That afternoon, she sat at the tiny desk in her cottage with a cup of chamomile and changed her mailing address with Social Security. Then Medicare. Then every financial institution she could remember. She removed Lindsay from every authorized user field, stripped Brian's name from her auto insurance backup contact, and revoked power of attorney documents dated before her husband died. Every click, every submission, every form scanned and uploaded. It was like exhaling slowly after years of holding her breath. At sunset, she sat by the lake with a sweater around her shoulders and her old wedding ring in her palm. Not wearing it, not tossing it, just holding the weight of everything she'd built, only to be treated like a passenger in the vehicle she'd bought. A dragonfly landed on the porch rail. She whispered, "They thought I was being dramatic." The dragonfly didn't move. They never knew I was being precise. Just after 9 p.m., her burner phone buzzed on the nightstand. "Rourke, you're still listed as co-owner on their home. Want to change that?" Marianne stared at the screen, her fingers curling into a slow, deliberate fist. She didn't respond right away. She reached for her notebook instead and wrote, 47% of the home, 0% of the respect. Then she underlined it once and turned off the light. "They erased my worth in words. I rewrote it in documents." Marianne opened the manila folder labeled Mortgage, 2015, and stared at the co-signature line, her own name sitting beside Brian's in black ink that had long since faded into gray. Her hand had shaken when she signed that page years ago, her husband still breathing, barely, in the hospital bed back then. Brian had said it was just a formality. "Temporary, Mom," he'd promised, "just until we get through Dad's treatment." They never refinanced. But they had moved on, without her. The next morning, she and Rourke sat on a Zoom call, his office blinds casting long shadows behind him. She explained the co-signature and the timeline. He listened with his fingers steepled. "Do you remember if you ever signed a quitclaim deed?" he asked. She blinked. "What's that?" He smiled without humor. "Exactly the answer I needed. Legally, Marianne, you still own 47% of that house." Her stomach didn't flip. Her chest didn't tighten. She just nodded, like someone who had finally found the corner piece in a decades-long jigsaw puzzle. "Can we make that official?" she asked. "We can make it airtight." By Thursday, she'd opened an LLC, Still Standing LLC, named after a phrase she'd once whispered into her bathroom mirror after Lindsay slammed a door in her face. The LLC would hold her 47% interest in the house, not Marianne Holloway, not Mom, not Nana, just a business entity now, with a separate mailing address, with legal standing, with no emotions to manipulate. Rourke handled the transfer while she bought herself a slice of blackberry pie from the local diner and sat at a sun-drenched corner booth, flipping through her notebook. She made a new list. Paper trail, people pleaser. Later that evening, she stood at the edge of the dock by her rented cottage. The wind pulled at her sleeves as she held the fresh paperwork, pages still warm from the print shop. The house wasn't her home anymore, but part of it was still hers. She now owned it under a name they couldn't guilt or gaslight. It felt less like revenge and more like reclamation. That weekend, she picked up a prepaid flip phone from the general store and activated it just long enough to set up a line of communication with one person, her granddaughter, Emma. She texted the number, unannounced. "Hi, sweetheart. It's Nana. Just me. Just safe. Don't tell your mom. Not yet. I love you more than you know." The reply came 2 hours later. "Nana, Mommy says you ran away. Are you okay?" Marianne stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she returned inside and made herself a cup of ginger tea, sat at the small table near the window, where the breeze lifted the edge of the lace curtain and the scent of rain snuck through the screen. She took her time, let the moment settle. Then she picked up her phone again. Not to type, to take a picture. She held the phone out, framed herself just right, smiling gently, not smugly. A beam of late-day sun caught her silver hair, her tea in one hand, the title transfer in the other. She clicked, sent. Nothing else, no caption, no preface, just a new version of herself made of light, paper, and proof. Across the miles in the living room where Marianne used to fold laundry and slip $20 bills into coat pockets before winter, the photo buzzed across Emma's tablet. Emma stared at the image. Her mother didn't notice. Her father didn't ask. But someone saw Marianne, and that was enough, for now. Marianne sat cross-legged on the bed in her rented cottage, surrounded by paper. Stacks of bank statements, grocery receipts, utility bills, aftercare invoices, birthday party decorations. Each printed piece of her erased contributions fluttered like leaves around her. The printer whirred beside her, spitting out the last page of a color-coded spreadsheet she'd titled 6 Years of Care, Itemized. At the bottom of the final column, the number stared back at her. $86,443.12. She whispered the number aloud, not for disbelief, but ceremony. She had saved the receipts the way women of her generation saved thread, neatly rolled, just in case. Not because she thought she'd ever need proof, but because habit was harder to break than heartbreak. Gas cards, grocery runs, school supplies, co-pays for the kids' checkups, emergency plumber, tutoring, clothes for growing feet, new tires for Brian's car during that bad snowstorm. They never asked her to pay for all of it. They also never told her to stop. By noon, she slid the binder across Rourke's desk. "Color-coded," he noted with a small smile. Marianne nodded. "Old habit. Education budget forms." He flipped a few pages, his lawyer's mind already processing angles and statutes. "This qualifies," he said finally. "Under California Elder Contribution Reimbursement Act. You gave substantial, sustained financial support under false pretenses of gratitude or reciprocation." "Is that the legal way of saying, 'they used me'?" she asked. He met her eyes. "Yes." By the end of the week, he filed the paperwork. Holloway vs. Holloway, petition for reimbursement and restitution of elder contribution. The case was civil, not personal, but it felt like both. Days later, she received a notice. Her name had been quietly removed from the children's school pickup list. Another followed, emergency contact records, updated per parental request. She stared at both letters. No discussion, no heads up, just deletion. Then came the envelope, Brian's handwriting on the front. No return address, but the same blocky loops she used to help him perfect in second grade. She opened it with a paring knife. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Mom, please stop. You're ruining things. You're hurting the kids. You're embarrassing us. Can't we just fix this quietly?" Brian. She read it twice. "No, I'm sorry. No, we were wrong. No, thank you. Just a request to stop, to go back to being invisible." She took out her own pen. No lawyer, no printer, no formatting. Just one sentence. Number, "I'm not ruining things. I'm restoring them." She mailed it the same day. That night, Marianne brewed chamomile tea and opened her laptop. Outside, frogs sang along the lakeside. Her hands hovered over the keys for a long moment. Then she began, "Mouths to Feed, Memoirs of a Mother Who Paid." She started with the phrase Lindsay had dropped like a shoe, just mouths to feed now, wrote about the bruised silence that came after it, about the decades of work no one noticed because she did it too well. She poured her ledger into narrative, her receipts into revelation. And for the first time, she wrote about herself, not as mom, not as Nana, not as someone's wife, just Marianne, fully spelled out. 2 days later, the email landed like a question she hadn't dared form, from inquiries@seniorvoices.org. Subject, possible feature? Dear Ms. Holloway, we came across your piece in the Legal Filing Index. Would you consider sharing your story anonymously for our Senior Rights series? Your perspective could help so many. Marianne reread the message 3 times, then looked at her own subject line from earlier that night. Draft saved. Chapter 2. Marianne sat on the edge of the bed, laptop open, mic muted. The soft, static hum of the waiting room tone echoed in her ears as her fingers gripped the chipped ceramic mug of lukewarm coffee. Behind her, the lake shimmered in late afternoon light, quiet, undemanding. On screen, the journalist smiled gently. We'll keep your name out of it, I promise. Just your story, your voice, no face. Marianne unmuted. You can change my name, but don't change my words. The interview lasted 22 minutes. The audio would later be edited down to 13, but Marianne's phrases landed like lightning. I didn't leave because I was ungrateful. I left because they were. They weren't ashamed of taking from me, only of being told they took. Women don't disappear. We withdraw funding. The piece dropped 2 days later under the title, The Matriarch Exit: How One Retiree Took Her Worth With Her. It didn't go viral overnight. It went viral in hours. The comments flooded in like rain through a cracked roof. I cried. She told my story. How many of us are one insult away from vanishing? Thank you for not going quietly. Just mouths to feed. Never again. The site crashed briefly from traffic. By morning, Marianne's words had made it to forums she'd never heard of, caregiver threads, women's finance pages, even Reddit. She had no account, but Camille sent her screenshots, reading them out like postcards. She called you a burden, Camille said. Now you're the blueprint. The email came that night from a support group moderator, Mothers Who Walked Away. They were hosting a virtual panel next week. Would Marianne speak? Voice only, of course. She hesitated. I'm not a speaker. You already did, the moderator wrote. You just didn't hear the applause. Marianne logged in under the username Holloway68. There were 9 women on the panel, all muted, camera off. The host, Rhonda, welcomed them gently, like opening a door without pushing. When it was Marianne's turn, her voice cracked only once. I kept thinking I was the bad mother for leaving, but if I'd stayed, I'd have taught them how to mistreat me with a smile. No one interrupted, no one challenged, just quiet murmurs of, yes and same, and God thank you. 2 days later, Rourke called. His voice carried the tone of barely disguised amusement. Well, they're spiraling. Marianne raised an eyebrow. Define they. Brian's credit score just dropped 42 points. Apparently, Lindsay tried opening a new line of credit and listed your frozen account as the fallback. Marianne stirred her tea. And? They're now flagged under fraud risk monitoring. She let that sink in. Not for satisfaction, but closure. They tried to run the house like a business, she said. I just became the board. Then came the public tantrum. Lindsay posted a paragraph-long Facebook status, wrapped in faux vulnerability and passive aggression. When family betrays you financially, it's worse than strangers. We've been attacked by someone we trusted. The damage is real. Pray for our kids. They've lost stability. The comments initially poured in with sympathy, but then someone linked Marianne's interview, then another added the civil filing. One comment stuck like a dart. You didn't lose stability. You lost funding. Lindsay tried to clap back, but the thread had shifted. It wasn't hers anymore. Marianne didn't check Facebook. Camille did that for her. But she read the printed comments that her goddaughter clipped and mailed. One comment had hearts under it from 17 other women. This is what accountability looks like. Not vengeance. Boundaries. That evening, Marianne sat on her porch, blanket over her legs, fireflies blinking in the tree line. She didn't feel vindicated. Not yet. She felt still. She looked out over the lake, then down at her notebook, where she'd written the next essay's title. They called it Selfish. I called it Self-Exit. Marianne didn't need to look for the drama. It found her, wrapped in pixelated desperation, and posted for the world to see. Camille had just stepped through the cottage door with groceries when she held up her phone, jaw tight. "Did you see this?" Marianne adjusted her glasses, squinting at the Facebook post Camille was holding out like it reeked. There, in big, bold text from Lindsay's account, "Family can destroy you faster than strangers. We've been financially ambushed. Prayers up." Beneath it, screenshots. A declined grocery order, a blocked card notification, and a blurred-out photo of what looked like a bank statement. "No names," Camille said, "but we know exactly who she means." Marianne gave a slow blink and walked over to the kettle. "Of course she didn't use my name. She hasn't used it in years, just my wallet." The irony came quickly. While Lindsay aired grievances to her digital pity parade, commenters did some digging. It took only hours for someone to link Marianne's anonymous essay in the comments. "This sounds a lot like that woman who left her household and froze all the cards. She told her story on a blog. Remember?" By noon, the story was back on trending lists. Mouths to Feed, Memoirs of a Mother Who Paid, found a second wind, quoted in newsletters, reposted on caregiver pages, and passed between groups of women like an heirloom manual. Comments flooded in. "She said what I've always felt. I was her. I am her. She didn't disappear. She reclaimed." The next wave came with a more official tone. Rourke called late afternoon, sounding like he'd skipped lunch and patience. "Just got a notice. Brian filed a petition to gain limited conservatorship over your finances." Marianne didn't flinch. "On what basis?" "Implied mental instability. They're claiming sudden erratic behavior since you left." She actually laughed. "Leaving was the sanest thing I've ever done." "Well," Rourke said, flipping papers on the other end of the line, "luckily you passed a full cognitive assessment last month and had it notarized. Preemptive legal prep. Nice touch." Marianne poured herself another cup of tea. "They planned for my money. I planned for my memory." The following day, Camille arrived with 2 tote bags of groceries, a hug, and a firm knock. Her face lit up at the smell of rosemary and chicken already roasting in the oven. "You're becoming a recluse with flair," she joked, unpacking a bottle of wine. Marianne smirked. "Reclusive? Maybe. Broke? Never again." They ate on the porch, the wind off the lake threading between them like a blessing. Camille handed her a folded printout from an email she received from a financial publisher. "They want to syndicate your essay," she said, "as the cornerstone piece in their new caregiver series." Marianne studied the paper for a beat, then folded it neatly. "Only if they omit names. I'm not interested in dragging anyone. I already left." Camille nodded. "You're setting a bar, not burning a bridge." That night, Marianne scrolled through her own essay again, half out of pride, half out of disbelief. The woman in the words had once thought she couldn't leave. Now she was being quoted on platforms with thousands of shares. She read one comment aloud. "I left, too. I used her words to tell my son no for the first time in years." Another, "She's the blueprint." The word lingered. Blueprint. Not burden, not background, not mouths to feed. Blueprint. As Marianne rinsed her teacup and stared out over the still lake, her phone buzzed in her pocket again. "Rourke," she answered immediately. "They're trying to refinance the house," he said. "Brian and Lindsay, without your consent." A long silence. Then Marianne said softly but firmly, "Do they forget I still own nearly half the deed? They assumed you wouldn't fight." Marianne walked to her desk drawer, opened the folder labeled Property, and ran her fingers over the LLC transfer documents. "They assumed wrong," she said. "File the block. I want them to feel what silence costs." The temperature had dropped in their neighborhood, not just in degrees, but in reality. While the thermostat in Brian and Lindsay's house blinked a low battery warning, somewhere 90 miles away, Marianne sat in front of her fireplace, logs crackling, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of cedar and calm. She clicked send on the formal lender notification. Notice of financial control, owner-shareholder transfer restriction filed, 1 signature, 3 lines, instant silence on their end. Earlier that morning, Rourke had called with a smirk in his voice. "They tried to refinance again," he said, "this time with falsified income documents and no mention of your ownership. Bold move." Marianne stirred honey into her tea. "Bold doesn't mean bright." He chuckled. "They're going to panic. We'll have a copy of the block filed with county records by Friday. No one touches that house without your say-so now." Marianne's fingers hovered above her laptop keyboard. "Let's also send a courtesy email to the lender. Make it official." On it. Click. By noon the storm had arrived, but only online. Lindsay had posted another scorched earth status to her Facebook page. "Pray for us." When mental illness goes unchecked in families, it hurts everyone. Our children don't deserve this. No names, again, but her meaning was razor sharp. This time, she included a photo of their thermostat set at 60 degrees and a blurry shot of the kids wrapped in blankets on the couch. The caption, "This is what legal cruelty looks like." Comments trickled in, some offering sympathy, others asking, "Isn't your mother-in-law the one who paid your bills for years?" Lindsay never answered those. Rourke sent a cease and desist that afternoon, titled plainly, "Cease Online Harassment, Public Libel Notification." Marianne reviewed it, added a note in the margin, attached screenshots as exhibits, and approved the dispatch. As Rourke prepped the legal response, Marianne returned to her journal. The one she'd kept since that night she heard the words, "just mouths to feed." She flipped to a fresh page, wrote 5 words. "Why I left without a word." Then she opened her laptop and turned those 5 words into another essay. The piece went live by evening, anonymous again, just like before. It opened like a whisper. "I didn't leave to punish. I left to protect myself. I left the way women are trained not to, silently, strategically, and with receipts." Within 24 hours, it was reposted by AARP, picked up by Forbes Women, and quoted on 2 elder advocacy legal blogs. A retired judge even commented, "This should be required reading for anyone assigning power of attorney." The story had weight now. Marianne's words weren't just validation, they were blueprint. Camille dropped by that night with lemon bars and a copy of the Forbes article printed and clipped like a trophy. "You know what's wild?" she said, settling on the couch beside Marianne. "You're out here moving mountains with essays, and they still think they can guilt you into silence." Marianne smiled. "It's always the same play. You left us. Not one asks why." Camille handed her a glass of wine, "Because the answer makes them look in the mirror." They sat together for hours, the kind of quiet that's earned after years of noise. Outside, wind rustled leaves across the lake. Inside, Marianne's inbox lit up with new subscriber notifications and thank you notes from strangers across the country. One, from a woman in Arizona, read, "Your silence was strategy. Thank you for showing me mine can be too." Marianne leaned back, letting the warmth settle deep. At 11:47 p.m., her phone buzzed. A new email from Brian Holloway. Subject, "Can we just talk?" She opened it. "If you want to talk, just say that. Stop lawyering everything. This is still family. You don't have to be like this." She stared at the screen, expression unmoved. Then she clicked "Mark unread," stood up, and rinsed her teacup clean. The chairs in Rourke's conference room weren't made for comfort. They were built for finality. Stiff, straight-backed, and unsympathetic. Like the people who only show up when consequences arrive. Marianne sat in one, facing the door. Her handbag rested at her feet, her expression unreadable. The legal pad in front of her bore a single line, underlined 3 times. "Stay factual, not emotional." She'd brought no tissue, no handkerchief. She had nothing to cry about anymore. At precisely 10 a.m., the door creaked open. Brian stepped in, a hesitant half-smile dying quickly on his lips as he saw her face. He looked smaller than she remembered, not in size, but in certainty. He gave her a nod. "Hi, Mom." She offered only a tilt of her head. No warmth, just acknowledgement. Brian sat across from her, his hands clasped tightly in front of him like a student at a disciplinary hearing. The silence stretched for a beat too long before Rourke leaned forward and pressed a button on the digital recorder. Meeting Comet. All parties informed this is being recorded. Marianne Grace Holloway and Brian Holloway present, legal counsel retained. Subject, financial separation discussion. Brian cleared his throat, staring at the table. I don't understand why it had to go this far. We're family. Were, Marianne said plainly. He blinked. Come on. You know Lindsay didn't mean it like that. Marianne's face didn't move. She said what she felt when she thought I wasn't listening. You nodded. That was the truest part of the whole thing. Brian sat back, rubbing his jaw. We didn't realize how much pressure you were under. If you'd said something, I said it every time I paid a bill no one thanked me for. Every time I stayed quiet to keep peace in a house I financed. I said it in silence because your comfort came first. Rourke slid a manila folder across the table. Our proposal is simple. Ms. Holloway is offering a severance. $15,000 to finalize disentanglement. No future claims, no further contact necessary. You'll both walk away clean. Brian opened the folder, flipped through the paperwork, then let it fall shut. 15 grand? He scoffed. That barely covers one semester of preschool. Marianne's voice was calm. It's not compensation. It's courtesy. You're getting a grace I was never given. The door behind them swung open sharply, and Lindsay strode in without an invitation. Her heels clicked like accusations on the hardwood floor. You're really going through with this? She snapped. You'd rather bankrupt your own family than talk like adults? Marianne didn't flinch. This is talking. You just don't like the form. Lindsay's voice rose. We housed you, fed you. I paid the mortgage, Marianne said, fed the kids, covered the insurance. If you're going to rewrite history, at least sharpen the pencil. Lindsay turned to Brian. Say something. But he stayed silent, eyes locked on his hands again. Marianne took a breath, then leaned forward slightly. This isn't revenge. This is inventory. Of what was taken, what was never appreciated, and what I choose never to replenish. Rourke cleared his throat. Do you accept the terms? Lindsay crossed her arms. Absolutely not. Brian hesitated. His voice was barely above a whisper. Then, no. Marianne stood. Then we're done here. She didn't slam anything, didn't raise her voice. She simply picked up her handbag, nodded once at Rourke, and walked out the door. The recorder clicked off behind her. Back at the cottage, the air smelled of pine needles and a slight tinge of fall. Marianne made herself a cup of green tea and sat on the porch wrapped in her shawl. The legal folder sat beside her, untouched. She didn't need to reread the terms. She'd lived them already. Her phone buzzed with a new email notification. The subject line made her pause. Invitation. National Elder Financial Protection Conference, Keynote Opportunity. She opened it slowly, eyes scanning the message. We've followed your story through the syndication and legal advocacy networks. We believe your voice would offer invaluable insight into the rising cases of elder financial abuse. Would you consider being our keynote speaker in Washington this October? Marianne smiled without showing her teeth. They thought she'd run from shame. Instead, she'd walked straight into clarity. She accepted the invitation. Later that evening, she lit a candle on the table beside her bed, not out of ritual, out of intention. She opened her leather-bound journal and wrote one sentence beneath the date. He spoke too late. I didn't. The stage lights were soft but focused, just enough to cast a glow, not a glare. Marianne stood at the center of the platform in a navy blue cardigan, slacks, and her late husband's watch, ticking steady against her wrist. The room held about 200 folding chairs, but it felt like more. The kind of quiet that carries weight, not absence. She took a breath, looked at the audience, then leaned slightly toward the mic. My name is Marianne Holloway, she began. I am a retired educator, a widow, a mother. But for most of my later years I was mistaken for a mat. Flat, expected to be stepped on and always underfoot. I'm not anymore. The room didn't erupt in applause. It inhaled. It had started as a local elder advocacy panel. Moderate turnout, some legal aid sponsors, a few journalists. But someone had filmed it on their phone. Someone else had uploaded it to YouTube under the title, Just a Mother, Not a Mat. In 4 days, the video hit 2.1 million views. Comment after comment poured in. I thought I was alone. She said what my heart screamed for years. I helped raise their kids. They called me free labor. Marianne scrolled through them slowly one night, tea in hand and Camille on the other couch, crocheting something red and defiant. You're not just viral, Camille said. You're a movement. That night, they opened a private Facebook group. Camille named it Unfed, Unapologetic. Membership climbed steadily, 300, then 500, then nearly 2,000 in under 2 weeks. Women from all over the country posted stories. Some left only initials and city names. Some posted scans of bills they'd paid for families who'd now ghosted them. Marianne shared resources, scripts for boundary setting, exit planning templates, sample financial affidavits, each one tested by her. Each one written in calm, surgical detail. She uploaded her original essay, Mouths to Feed, as a pinned post, under a pen name. But everyone knew it was hers. Then came Lindsay. Late one Tuesday, Camille burst into the cottage holding her phone like it was radioactive. She posted it. Marianne looked up. What? She filed for a restraining order, says you're cyberbullying. Marianne blinked, then chuckled low. Filing something doesn't make it true. They'll have to prove harassment. Facts matter. That's what they never got. By Friday, the judge agreed. Petition denied. Camille updated the group website that night. Founder, Marianne G. Holloway. Mission, protecting the invisible, elevating the unthanked. She added a new section, Quiet Exits. It listed safe deposit boxes, low-profile attorneys, and digital safety tips. Marianne contributed an article titled, How to Freeze a Card and Heat a Future. But the next morning brought something even stranger. Marianne was feeding the birds outside when Camille stepped onto the porch holding her laptop, eyes wide. You got an email. From Los Angeles. Marianne took the laptop, brushing birdseed dust from her fingers. Subject, Option Rights. Interested in a limited series pitch. Dear Ms. Holloway, we've followed the media around your anonymous essay and recent keynote. We're developing a scripted project centered on themes of financial gaslighting, generational guilt, and elder reclamation. Would you consider consulting, or better yet, being the inspiration behind a new kind of story? She read it twice, then whispered, They think it's fiction. Camille grinned, which is what makes it perfect. Later that night, Marianne sat alone in her bedroom, staring at her laptop. The screen glowed, the cursor blinked. She drafted a reply. Dear producer, you may adapt the spirit of my story, if you agree to one clause. The matriarch doesn't die to make a point, she lives to reclaim it. She hit send. The script opened with a car engine starting in the dark. One woman, one duffel, a porch light left on but no goodbye note. The scene faded into the sound of morning birds and a ticking dashboard clock. It wasn't fiction. It was Marianne's life, edited for screen but stripped of none of its ache. You sure you want the first line to be, She vanished before sunrise and no one even missed breakfast? The screenwriter asked. Marianne sat across from her in the cottage's dining nook, surrounded by marked-up pages, empty mugs, and Camille's laptop humming in the background. I'm sure, Marianne said. Let them flinch early. Camille grinned from the couch. It's poetic justice in prime time. After weeks of meetings and rewrites, the project had found its legs. The producer from Los Angeles didn't want a documentary. She wanted prestige television. Working title, Silent Exit. Camille, who had quietly studied script formatting and production timelines between support group moderating and grocery runs, was now listed as associate producer. Technically, she said one night, holding up the email confirmation, this makes us a production company. Marianne raised her wine glass. We didn't just unfund them, we outwrote them. They toasted over popcorn, sitting on the floor with episode 1's beat sheet between them. The pilot opened on a woman not unlike Marianne, older, underestimated and unseen, leaving a full house at dawn. Her face was blank, but her movements were precise. No crying, no hesitating. The actress wore Marianne's cardigan. The director used real quotes from her essays. Even the duffel in the shot was a replica of Marianne's original, scuffed, zipped with documents, silent as her departure. Every frame, the showrunner had said on Zoom, carries intent, just like she did. Marianne remained involved, but behind the curtain. She reviewed scripts, flagged lines that rang false, and ensured the matriarch character wasn't turned into a martyr or a caricature. One note she sent read simply, "She's not bitter. She's awake." In the fictional version, there was no courtroom scene, no tearful reconciliation, just contracts, account closures, and consequences. When asked if they could add a moment of forgiveness, Marianne wrote back, "You don't forgive someone who only regrets getting caught." And then, in the middle of all the production emails and conference calls, her phone lit up with a name she hadn't seen in months. Brian. Just a text, no punctuation, no emojis, just 7 heavy words. "Hope you're proud of yourself." "I'm not." Marianne stared at the screen. For a second, she felt that old tug, the reflex to explain, to soothe, to protect the ego that never protected her. But the tug passed like a muscle cramp, faint, pointless, and entirely survivable. She pressed the side button. Screen off. Some messages deserve no reply because silence is the last boundary. The next day, she and Camille were stacking catering brochures for the production wrap party when her phone rang again. This time, it was Rourke. Marianne answered immediately. "Tell me it's done," she said. Rourke's voice cracked into a smile. "It's done." She sat down. The brochure slid to the floor unnoticed. "All filings cleared," he continued. "Title and deed are fully yours. You now own 100% of the house." Marianne let the words settle. The cottage, the production, the show. None of it had unanchored her like that sentence. She thought about the house's front step, where she used to sit while waiting for the mail, the kitchen where she made bone broth for a sick toddler while Lindsay scrolled Instagram, the hallways she swept, the bills she paid, the silence she endured. And now, legally and entirely, it belonged to her. But only until she decided otherwise. She exhaled deeply, then looked across the table at Camille. "You still got that sign-making kit?" Camille blinked. "Why?" Marianne smiled, slow and full. "Because I think we're staging one final scene of our own." The for sale sign went up just before sunrise. Marianne watched from across the street, coffee in hand, wrapped in the same coat she wore the morning she left it all behind. Except now, she wasn't fleeing. She was finalizing. The house looked smaller than she remembered, or maybe she just stood taller now. She walked through it one last time with the realtor, her heels clicking softly on hardwood she had mopped after toddler spills, family fights, and late-night tears no one noticed. The realtor, young, chipper, with a business card that smelled faintly like lavender, rattled off market comps and listing stats. Marianne only half listened. She ran her fingers along the banister, then paused in the living room where Brian once told her she should just be grateful to live rent-free. Her reply had been silence. But silence was no longer her currency. Within 3 days, 6 offers came in. The highest was from a couple offering all cash. But Marianne chose the single mom from Duluth, a nurse with 2 kids and a soft laugh over the phone. She read the woman's letter twice, then wrote her own. "May this roof never insult you. May the walls listen gently. And may you always know you're the one who holds it all together, not the drywall." She folded it into a pale blue envelope and handed it to the realtor with the keys. The day she left for good, she didn't cry. Instead, she stopped by the neighborhood bakery where she once bought birthday cupcakes for Brian's daughter. She bought a cinnamon roll for herself, extra frosting, and ate it in the parking lot with no one asking her for a bite. She drove straight to her new home, a lakefront tiny house with cedar siding and wide steps that welcomed rather than loomed. Camille met her there with a fresh-baked quiche and paint on her overalls. "I thought it needed something out front," Camille said, holding up a plank of wood-painted soft cream. Cursive letters danced across it in dark blue. Mouths don't feed, matriarchs do. Marianne let out a sound that was part laugh, part exhale. She nodded slowly, like someone recognizing themselves in a photo for the first time in years. "It's perfect," she said. The lake glistened just yards from her back door. Ducks glided in quiet clusters. A heron stood still in the reeds, as if guarding something sacred. Inside, her belongings fit neatly. Every drawer had intention, no clutter, no voices talking over hers, no unpaid favors hanging in the air. Camille lit a cinnamon candle. Marianne poured 2 glasses of sparkling cider. "To rooms that see us," Camille said. "To exits that lead home," Marianne replied. They clinked glasses and drank. Later that night, Marianne sat at her writing desk, smaller than the one she'd used in the family house, but somehow more her size. She pulled out the envelope she had prepared weeks ago. It was addressed to Brian. No return address, just his full name in her neat script. Inside, a single page, typed, measured, unflinching. "You once said I was just mouths to feed. I was the roof, the walls, the foundation. You don't inherit from what you insult. Consider this the receipt." She folded it carefully, slid it into the envelope, sealed it with her thumb pressed firm. She placed it on the counter, ready for the post office tomorrow. Outside, the wind picked up. The trees swayed like they were nodding in approval. The moonlight touched the surface of the lake in soft, shimmering strokes. Marianne looked out through the screen door and whispered to herself, "This is mine." Every inch, not because it was bought, because it was chosen. The envelope arrived 2 days after Marianne mailed it, but she knew the moment it hit his hands. The silence told her. No reply, no acknowledgement, no tantrum. Just the echo of realization cracking across whatever illusion Brian had been holding onto. In a beige 2-story house that once echoed with Marianne's laughter and the scent of Sunday pot roast, Brian sat at the kitchen table staring at the single sheet of paper. Typed, no salutation, no warmth. Your inheritance was your chance. You spent it. Folded beside it was the voided trust form, ink slashed clean through it. Behind that, the court ruling. Full severance. Legal, permanent, irrevocable. At the bottom of the letter, in her unmistakable script, she'd written, "I was more than you saw. You now own what you valued. Nothing." Beneath that, her name, formal, final, and unapologetic. Marianne Grace Holloway, owner, survivor, author. 90 miles away, she was on her knees in her garden, gently patting soil around the roots of a purple salvia plant. She wore soft gloves, a flannel shirt, and the kind of calm earned by walking through fire and not begging for rescue. The wind rustled. The chimes Camille hung last week clinked against each other like polite applause. She didn't check her email. She didn't refresh the news. Her story was already out there, louder than any interview could ever be. After the essay series went viral, a producer-turned-podcaster reached out. "We'd like to adapt it into a series," the woman said. "Not drama, documentation, first person, just truth." Marianne agreed on one condition. No voice actors, no edits for sympathy. Say it exactly how I lived it. Camille came over twice a week to help with recording. They worked from Marianne's sunroom, mics between them, tea in hand. The title was simple, Final Withdrawal. In the first episode, Marianne's voice cut clean through the intro music. "They didn't empty my accounts. They emptied the room when I stopped paying." By week 3, the podcast was number 6 on national charts. Interview requests poured in. Local news, radio shows, even national morning segments. Marianne declined every single one. Instead, she planted tomatoes. She made scones. She read used novels left in the neighborhood library box. Her story didn't need a new platform. It had already done its job. One morning, Camille pulled up in her beat-up Ford with something strapped in the truck bed. It was covered in a dusty sheet. "What's this?" Marianne asked, wiping her hands on her jeans. "A thank you," Camille said, dragging the sheet off with a single, proud yank. Underneath was a bench, simple wood, smooth finish, curved armrests like open hands, etched across the back. She left without a word, but wrote a movement. Marianne swallowed hard. Her fingers traced the engraving. No applause, no spotlight, just this. She sat down slowly, as if measuring the weight of her own journey. "Camille," she said quietly, "this is too much." Camille laughed. "Number? It's exactly enough." That afternoon, Marianne sat on the bench, watching dragonflies flirt with the surface of the lake. Her hands rested in her lap. Her story didn't hang in the air. It lived in it, woven into every breath of peace she now owned. She didn't wonder if Brian had read the letter. She didn't care if he cried. She'd already withdrawn the last thing he ever expected, herself. The email came in at 3:04 a.m., subject line blinking like a quiet trumpet. "Unfed, unapologetic has hit 10,000 members." Marianne stared at it in the soft blue light of her phone, still seated at her kitchen table, a cooling mug of chamomile steeped beside her. She didn't smile right away. She exhaled. 10,000 women, 10,000 stories that weren't just hers. When she and Camille launched the private online group, they expected maybe 100 women. Maybe 200 if the podcast hit a second wind. But within 3 weeks of the final withdrawal series airing its final episode, they'd been flooded. Teachers, nurses, retired accountants, widows, divorced, estranged, exhausted. Some had left quietly like her. Others hadn't had the chance. Each entry form asked one question: what made you stop paying? Each answer, raw, beautiful, terrifying. The morning the pilot for Silent Exit premiered, Marianne was too nervous to sit still. She cleaned the baseboards. She polished the silverware. She repotted a plant that didn't need repotting. Camille arrived with popcorn, wine, and 2 throw blankets, already in tears. "They used your actual line," she beamed, cueing up the stream. "The one from the garden bench episode." Marianne raised an eyebrow. "I said a lot of lines." But when the fictional version of her walked out the front door in Dawn's soft hush, duffel in hand, no note left behind, and no apology stitched in the silence, she stopped breathing. The comment section exploded within hours. "This made me call my mom. I never knew other women felt this invisible. I'm not just a meal ticket, I'm a damn person." One woman wrote, "I watched this while my grown son complained about the Wi-Fi I pay for. I shut it off mid-episode." Camille refreshed the page, then grabbed Marianne's hand. "Look, not too bad for just a mouth," she said. And then she built a movement. Marianne chuckled, then whispered the words back. "Not too bad. For just a mouth." Letters arrived in her P.O. box from every corner of the country, most handwritten. Some typed on fading ribbon ink. One was from a state senator in Illinois, thanking her for what the show had sparked, a new subcommittee on financial guardianship abuse. Another came from New Mexico, offering to name her as an honorary consultant for an elder rights initiative. Marianne set each letter beside the others on her bookshelf. She didn't tack them to the wall. She didn't need the world to know how high they stacked. She knew. The garden had grown denser, fuller. She kept it that way. Tomatoes mingled beside wildflowers. Eggplants peeked from under thick green vines. A small gnome Camille had given her stood guard with chipped paint and a knowing smile. "I never thought my name would mean anything," Marianne said one afternoon, watching Camille photograph the newest blooms. Camille grinned. "It's inked into law now." That night, Marianne pulled her wallet from the drawer and stared at the last card she'd ever frozen. The one in her name alone. The one she hadn't touched in almost a year. It wasn't just a visa. It was the first card she ever opened after getting married, back when she still signed her checks Marianne G. Holloway, with a soft heart and a sharper hope. She unpaused it with a tap, then made a reservation, for one. At the restaurant, she ordered whatever she wanted. Appetizer, entree, dessert. No calculator in her head, no second guessing. The waiter smiled and asked, "Will anyone else be joining you?" She smiled wider. Number just the important guest. Back home, her cottage hummed with nighttime stillness. She took off her shoes, unpinned her hair, lit the lavender candle Camille had gifted her months ago. Then she walked to her desk, slid open the drawer, pulled out a fresh legal pad. At the top, she wrote in her steady hand, 4 weeks later. Marianne reread the final sentence 3 times before hitting publish. No byline, no tags, no author photo, just the truth, dressed in paragraphs and silence. She titled it, 4 weeks later. Though the time didn't matter. What mattered was what the silence had grown into, something not bitter, but green. Rooted. The last line stood on its own, sharp and soft. You don't need applause when you own the exit. It was quiet on the lake that day. Still water, no wind. The kind of stillness you don't realize you've missed until it finds you. She took her lunch outside in a woven basket, tuna salad with lemon, a crusty sourdough roll, half an apple, and a mason jar of sun tea steeped in her windowsill. The dock creaked under her sandals as she walked out, set her chair, unfolded her napkin, ate without hurry. The breeze smelled of pine needles and warm bark. Somewhere, a loon called across the water. She didn't hear the phone at first. It was tucked under her sweater, muffled, but the buzz repeated, persistent. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. New York, New York. Let it ring. Then a voicemail notification slid in, followed by a text. This is Dana Keller with Windbreak Literary. I just read your piece. 4 weeks later. We've followed the podcast, the movement. If you're open to talking, we think there's a book here. Marianne tilted her head, chewing slowly. The phone buzzed again. Camille, you did it again, didn't you? That new piece? It's spreading fast. I'm bringing coffee. Don't argue. 15 minutes later, Camille's car pulled into the gravel drive, kicking dust into the golden sunlight. She stepped out with 2 cups and a ridiculous grin. I knew it, she said, handing Marianne the one with cinnamon on top. Your line is already getting quoted under anonymous accounts on TikTok. Marianne took a sip. I didn't write it to be quoted. Camille shrugged. You never do. That's why it lands. They sat in companionable silence, side by side, facing the lake. Wind lifted Marianne's gray curls just slightly. A dragonfly skimmed the surface. You ever think, Camille said, that maybe this all had to happen exactly this way? Marianne didn't answer right away. She let the question settle in her ribcage. No, she finally said, but I think I had to happen this way. The sun dipped lower, gilding the water. Camille pulled a small envelope from her tote. I was saving this, she said, for the right moment. Marianne opened it slowly. Inside, a folded photo of the garden bench. The inscription still visible. She left without a word, but wrote a movement. Tucked behind the photo was a gift card for Marianne's favorite seed shop. Camille winked. For your next season. Marianne felt her throat tighten, but not with grief, with breath. That evening, after Camille left, Marianne opened her journal and made a list. Not a to-do list, a done list. Left on my own terms, protected my peace legally, built a community, spoke without raising my voice, fed myself first. She tapped the pen once against the paper, then added a final entry. Didn't wait for permission to be full. When she set the journal aside, the stars were just beginning to flicker awake. The lake reflected them like tiny, trembling truths. She exhaled, leaned back in her chair and whispered, more to the night than to herself. I was just mouths to feed, until I fed myself first.